Late 1990s. Inside a building on the Harley-Davidson factory campus, the lights are mostly off. Building 42 used to hammer out military motorcycles under government contract, thousands of them, shipped out for decades. Now the contract is gone. The floor is empty. The tooling sits quiet. And somewhere in that silence, a handful of Harley engineers are staring at empty square footage and asking a question that will eventually put a $49,999 sticker on a motorcycle. What do we do with all this space? That's where this story actually starts. Not in a boardroom, not with a marketing deck. In an empty factory bay with nothing in it but opportunity. Here's what got destroyed because of what happened next. The idea that a factory-built Harley had to be a plain Harley. Before this program existed, if you wanted a truly custom Harley chrome, big paint, a stroked-out motor, you bought a stock bike and then paid a shop thousands more to rebuild it. After this program, Harley itself became the custom shop. That single shift is why, decades later, riders are willingly handing over the price of a Toyota Corolla for a motorcycle. Stick around, because the why behind that number is stranger and smarter than you'd think. Let's put a number on the stakes right away, because vague, "it changed everything" claims don't mean much without context. In the year 2000, a fully loaded factory custom Harley cost around $22,000, and people called it insane. Today, the flagship version of that same idea costs nearly $50,000, and it still sells out. That's not inflation. That's an entirely different business model, quietly replacing an entire industry of independent chrome shops, one motorcycle at a time. And almost nobody watching the price tag today knows where it actually came from. The world before, stock bikes and backyard chrome. To understand why Harley's factory custom program mattered, you have to understand how bad the alternative was. In the 1990s, if you owned a Harley and wanted it to look and feel like yours, not like the identical bike parked next to it at the dealership, you had exactly one path: aftermarket. That meant a trip to a local shop, a stack of catalogs, and a long, expensive process of bolting on parts that weren't designed to work together. Want a bigger engine? That's one shop. Want custom paint? That's a different shop, in a different town, with a different 6-week wait. Want it all covered under warranty when something inevitably rattled loose on the highway? Good luck. Riders were essentially building their dream bike through trial, error, and duct tape logic, and Harley was watching all of that money walk out the door to shops that had nothing to do with the company. Every dollar spent on aftermarket chrome was a dollar Harley didn't see. Every custom paint job done by a local shop was a paint job Harley didn't control. And every time one of those Frankenstein builds broke down on the road, it was Harley's brand reputation that took the hit, even though Harley never touched the bike. So here's the plain English translation. Harley had a factory sitting on unused capacity, a customer base already spending huge money customizing bikes on their own, and zero share of that spending. That's not a marketing problem. That's a business sitting on top of a gold mine and refusing to dig. And it wasn't a small gold mine. Custom motorcycle culture in America was already decades deep by the 1990s. An entire cottage industry of independent shops, painters, and machinists built almost entirely around the idea that a stock Harley was just a starting point, not a finished product. Riders would spend a year's worth of paychecks chasing a look and a sound that felt like theirs. The problem was that every piece of that journey happened outside Harley's walls, through a patchwork of vendors who had never even talked to each other, let alone tested their parts together on the same bike. A carburetor from one shop, paired with cams from another, could leave a rider stranded on the shoulder of a highway, and there was no single number to call for a warranty claim, because no single company had built the thing. Harley executives watching this from Milwaukee weren't blind to it. They could see the demand. What they didn't yet have was a way to capture it without turning their own factory into a custom chop shop for every walk-in order, which is exactly why an empty building sitting on freed-up military capacity became the perfect low-risk laboratory to try. Reveal, 1999, and the birth of CVO. Want to guess what Harley's fix looked like? It wasn't a new model, it was a new division. In 1999, Harley-Davidson launched Custom Vehicle Operations CVO for short, created in response to riders' demands for exclusive factory customs. The first bikes off the line were the FXR2 FXR2 and FXR3, resurrecting the beloved FXR platform that Harley had actually discontinued years earlier, now built in that same freed-up Building 42 space, using the leftover capacity from the military contract. Here's why that mattered in plain language. Harley wasn't inventing a new motorcycle from scratch. It was doing something far smarter, taking a chassis riders already loved, dressing it in premium paint and chrome, building it in small limited runs, and selling it directly from the factory with a full warranty. No more mixing and matching parts from 3 different vendors. No more voided warranties. Harley had just turned itself into the custom shop, and it kept every dollar of the upcharge. The formula locked in fast. By 2000, Harley followed up with the Screamin' Eagle Road Glide, built on the Fiat frame with a twin-cam engine, enhanced for a roughly 10% power increase and 14% torque gain over the stock motor. It carried more than $7,000 in premium features, a tinted windshield, a chrome-accented fairing, an upgraded stereo, and it retailed for $22,495, limited to just 1,500 units. $22,000 for a Harley in the year 2000. People thought Harley had lost its mind. Then those 1,500 units sold out. Here's why that detail, the number 1,500, actually matters more than the price. Harley wasn't trying to build a mass-market motorcycle. It deliberately capped production low enough that demand would always outpace supply. In plain language, scarcity was baked into the business plan from day one. A dealer might get 1, 2, maybe 3 units of a given CVO model for an entire model year. If you wanted one and you hesitated, somebody else in your town got it instead. That artificial scarcity is a huge part of why CVO buyers have never needed much convincing on price. The real competition wasn't against a cheaper motorcycle, it was against the guy standing next to you at the dealership with his own checkbook out. If you're the kind of person who nerds out on how legacy companies reinvent themselves without changing what made them great, that's basically what this channel is about. Hit subscribe. The aftermath, a domino effect nobody saw coming once. CVO proved that riders would pay a serious premium for factory-built exclusivity. Harley didn't slow down, it expanded, and it expanded fast. In 2001, the CVO program added an entire second assembly line at the York facility and rolled out the FX-DWG2, a Dyna model finished in scarlet red paint with 23-carat gold leaf flames, alongside a second-generation Screamin' Eagle Road Glide. In 2002, the lineup grew again, with a Dyna model packing a twin-cam 88 engine bored out to roughly 1,450 cubic centimeters, plus the very first CVO Road King. In 2003, coinciding with Harley's 100th anniversary, CVO launched its first softail model, a Screamin' Eagle Deuce, cementing the idea that this wasn't a one-off experiment, it was becoming a permanent, expanding wing of the company. By 2007, CVO bikes were debuting the new 110 cubic inch twin-cam engine a full year or more before that same engine trickled down into Harley's standard lineup. Why does any of that model year trivia matter to you watching this in 2026? Because it shows the pattern repeating itself year after year for over 2 decades. Every single time, the biggest engine, the newest electronics, and the boldest paint hit CVO first. The standard lineup got the leftovers a year or 2 later. Harley had essentially built its own internal venture capital arm, funded entirely by customers who wanted to be first. That last detail is the real domino effect, and it's easy to miss if you're not paying attention. CVO stopped being a side hustle for wealthy collectors and became Harley's research and development showcase. New engines, new electronics, new suspension components. They debuted on CVO first, got tested against real money on real roads, and only afterward migrated down into the bikes regular customers could actually afford. Harley had built a system where its most loyal, highest-spending customers were unknowingly funding next year's mainstream motorcycle. Competitors noticed. Indian Motorcycle, revived under Polaris in 2011, leaned hard into premium limited editions and vintage-inspired customs of its own. Yamaha and other cruiser makers pushed factory custom trims to chase the same buyer. None of them matched Harley's scale in this category, but the entire cruiser segment shifted. Customization was no longer something a rider did after buying the bike. It became something the manufacturer sold with the bike, baked into the price tag. The casualties were quieter, but real. Independent custom shops that once thrived rebuilding stock Harleys into personalized machines lost a meaningful meaningful slice of that business to the factory itself. Some diversified into service and maintenance. Others simply couldn't compete with a manufacturer that could offer factory paint, factory chrome, and a factory warranty in a single purchase, and closed their doors over the following 2 decades as that segment of demand shifted upstream to Milwaukee. There's also a name change worth noting because it tells you how confident Harley became in the brand it built. For its first decade, these bikes were marketed under the Screamin' Eagle performance name. In 2009, Harley dropped the Screamin' Eagle branding on these models and started calling them simply. The sub-brand had become bigger than the label it was hiding under. Watch the price climb. Before we get to today's number, look at how fast it climbed because the trend line tells its own story. The 2022 CVO Street Glide started around $41,899. The 2023 model moved to $42,999. The 2024 model landed near $43,899 to $44,499, depending on configuration. And the 2026 CVO Street Glide now sits at $49,999. That's roughly a 20% jump in 4 model years on a single motorcycle trim. Translate that into plain language. Harley isn't just charging more because materials got more expensive. It's charging more because it has learned, over a quarter of a century, that CVO buyers are far less price-sensitive than the average customer. This is a group buying an identity and a piece of exclusivity, not comparison shopping against a cheaper touring bike down the street. And every single year, Harley tests exactly how far that loyalty can stretch. Which brings us to today's bike, and that headline number. The 2026 CVO Street Glide carries a manufacturer's suggested retail price of financed over a 96-month term at roughly 12% APR with 10% down. Harley's own numbers put the monthly payment around $731 a month. That's not a motorcycle payment. That's a mortgage-adjacent payment for a machine with 2 wheels. So what do you actually get for that? A Milwaukee 8 121 engine, Harley's largest and most powerful production V-twin ever built, for a touring bike wrapped in paint schemes that reportedly take over 20 hours of hand finishing per unit. A 12.3-inch TFT touchscreen display, adaptive lighting, premium audio, all of it hand-assembled in limited numbers, with a serial number that ties directly back to your build. Here's the plain language translation of why any of that matters. You are not paying Harley for transportation. You're paying for the same thing CVO buyers have been paying for since 1999. A factory-verified version of the best bike in the lineup, with a warranty, without the fragmented aftermarket nightmare, and with the exclusivity of knowing your dealer only got a handful of these for the entire year. Is it worth $50,000? That depends entirely on what you're actually buying. If you're buying transportation, no, you can find excellent motorcycles for a fraction of the price. But CVO was never selling transportation. It was selling the exact thing riders were already spending thousands of dollars and months of their time chasing at independent shops back in the 1990s. Except now, it comes assembled, tested, and backed by the biggest name in American motorcycles. The legacy, 25 years later. That's the part that makes this more than a pricing story. CVO has now run for over a quarter of a century, longer than most car nameplates survive, built from a single insight. Harley's most devoted customers didn't want to be told what a normal Harley looked like. They wanted the factory to build them something nobody else on their block was riding. An idea born out of empty floor space in a Pennsylvania factory, leftover room from a cancelled military contract, turned into the platform where Harley now tests its most powerful engines, its most advanced electronics, and its boldest designs before anything else in the lineup gets to see them. The bikes that once cost $22,000 and felt outrageous now look almost modest next to a $50,000 flagship, and buyers are still lining up. Think about how rare that is in any industry. Most premium product lines eventually get undercut, copied, or quietly discontinued once the novelty wears off. One longtime CVO owner summed up the entire appeal of the program in a single sentence that stuck with fans for years. He wanted something special, but he didn't want to build it himself. That, in the end, is the whole story. Harley didn't just sell a motorcycle. It sold the shortcut to a dream riders had already been chasing on their own, and it's been cashing that check since 1999.